Good evening, I'm John Dickerson.
I'm Maurice Dubois.
There is more hope for peace in the Middle East tonight than there has been in a very long time. Hamas today released the last of the surviving Israelis held hostage since October 7th, 2023. And Israel, in turn, freed hundreds of Palestinian prisoners and detainees.
This is the first phase of the Trump peace plan. But remember, it is a 20-point plan, and there's still a long way to go. The president was in Israel today, meeting with families of the now free hostages and addressing the Knesset.
The president said the long nightmare for Israelis and Palestinians is over. Now, he said, it is time to turn the battlefield victories against terrorists into the ultimate prize, peace and prosperity for the entire Middle East.
Mr. Trump then traveled to Egypt to sign the peace deal and hold a summit on the future of Gaza and the region. CBS Morning's co-host Tony Dukoupil is heading up our coverage and joins us now from Jerusalem. Tony.
Good evening. Well, it's been a day of dramatic split-screen moments, and none more so than the sight of President Trump addressing the Israeli parliament at the final moment as the final hostages crossed out of Gaza and aid trucks rolled freely into Gaza. The result was, after 2 years now of brutal war, the unmistakable hope, the feeling in the air that something big had finally changed.
That was the moment when the tens of thousands gathered in Tel Aviv's newly rechristened Freed Square learned the first group of 7 living hostages had been released after 738 days in Hamas captivity. Red Cross convoys transported them from Gaza across the border into Israel. And all 20 were soon reunited with family. Among them, 25-year-old Eitan Moore, whose father locked his arms around his son and wouldn't let go. Matan Zangakar's mother, Einav, ran to her son's open arms and gave him a kiss. The family can't wait to see him, she said, including the dog. And while it seemed to take everything Bar Cooperstein's father Tal had to rise up out of his wheelchair, he did it to embrace his son. As everyday Israelis lined the streets to welcome the hostages home, we also noticed this moment, when the van carrying newly free Guy Gilboa Dalal stopped to allow him to show his gratitude to the crowd. Soon after, President Trump himself marked this historic day, addressing Israel's parliament, the Knesset.
After 2 harrowing years in darkness and captivity, 20 courageous hostages are returning to the glorious embrace of their families, and it is glorious. 28 more precious loved ones are coming home at last to rest in this sacred soil.
This, Mr. Trump says, is a new chance for the Middle East.
This is not only the end of a war. This is the end of an age of terror and death and the beginning of the age of faith and hope and of God. It's the start of a grand concord and lasting harmony for Israel and all the nations of what will soon be a truly magnificent region.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, for his part, praised the president for help brokering the deal.
Donald Trump is the greatest friend that the state of Israel has ever had in the White House.
Under the agreement, the remains of 28 hostages were expected to be released today before a noon deadline. But Hamas turned over only 4 bodies, according to IDF spokesperson Nadav Shoshani.
How fragile is this ceasefire?
We're very committed to it, but we understand who we're dealing with. Hamas is a terror organization. They are not holding their end of the bargain.
And while that young lieutenant colonel there is a realist, like just about everyone else in the Middle East, it seems, he also told me that he has never felt more optimistic about peace than he feels right now. And I have to say, he is not the only one. Now, as part of the peace deal, Israel released more than 1,900 Palestinians today, among them 250 prisoners serving life for attacks on Israelis. Complicated news for this country. More than half of them, though, are not going home. they're being deported to Egypt. Here's Debora Patta.
Palestinians set free from Israeli jails were welcomed by jubilant crowds. Around 1,700 are mostly men seized from Gaza during the war and held without ever being charged. Some have not seen their children for 2 years. Others broke down crying. All have returned to a place that no longer resembles the one they left behind. A devastated Gaza is much better than life in prison, this man said. The exchange of Palestinian prisoners and detainees for Israeli hostages marks the first step in a ceasefire it's hoped will permanently end the 2-year war. Our happiness is immense, said Abu Hajjaj, but there's still a wound in our hearts. God willing, we never see this war again. The ceasefire is a lifeline for everyone in Gaza. Due to an Israeli blockade, Gazans have been deprived of every basic necessity for so long. They're now battling for every scrap. The sheer scale of the devastation in Gaza defies description. Winter is coming, and people are trying to repair as much damage as possible. But it feels like an impossible task. Everything's gone, said this young boy, but I don't want to beg people for help. It's humiliating. Buried beneath the rubble are countless stories of loss and pain, each one personal. Together, according to Gaza health officials, they make over 170,000 injuries and more than 67,000 deaths. Now, the United Nations says they will need 600 trucks a day to ease the dire humanitarian crisis, but it is taking time as every truck has to undergo Israeli inspection before the aid can be distributed. Tony?
Debora, thank you very much. President Trump flew from Israel to Egypt, where he and the leaders of Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey signed on as guarantors of this Gaza peace deal. Then they held an international peace summit. Nancy Cordes is traveling with the president.
By the time President Trump boarded Air Force One this evening, his diplomatic blitz had spanned 12 hours on the ground in 2 countries.
That's all I do in my life. I make deals.
Here in Egypt, he huddled with heads of state and diplomats from 3 dozen countries to flesh out the finer points of his latest deal. Among the questions they need to resolve, who exactly will lead Gaza now? When will IDF forces fully withdraw? And who will compel Hamas fighters to hand over their weapons?
We're going to put some of you on the Board of Peace. Everybody wants to be on the Board of Peace. They said, would you be the chairman? I say, I'm pretty busy, too.
Trump's 20-point peace plan that was the basis for this deal calls for the creation of a temporary international stabilization force to help secure border areas in Gaza. But it is still unclear which countries will contribute troops, how large the force will be, and how long its deployment will last. One of the biggest questions of all is who will pay to rebuild war-torn Gaza. Regional experts estimate it will cost $53 billion. President Trump is the fundraiser in chief.
And the money is, of course, it's a lot of money, but it's not much compared to the value or the wealth of these tremendous countries. And they are ensuring stability and success in the Middle East.
President Trump and other leaders signed a new document here pertaining to the peace deal, but the contents of that document have not been made public. So we don't know if it contains new specifics about the phases to come. And we also don't know if it's been viewed by the Israelis and by Hamas and if they've signed off on it. Tony?
There's a lot we still don't know, but there is hope in the air. Nancy, thank you very much. John and Maurice, I'll send it back to you.
Tony, quickly before we lose you, you mentioned that hope in the air. When we talked to Nimrod Cohen's brother, he said when his brother was still held captive, they didn't allow themselves to hope because their hopes had been dashed so much. Where is the new hope for the future? Where do they talk about that? Where does that come from?
Well, this is a country capable of keeping two thoughts in mind at the very same time and still chewing gum and walking down the street. There's a quote that's come up, often attributed or a paraphrase to the late, great Golda Meir, a prime minister here in Israel. It's you have to pursue peace as though terrorism doesn't exist, and you have to, at the same time, combat terrorism as though peace has no chance. And the Israelis live by words like that, and that's how they do it, John. They hold two thoughts in their head at the very same time, and they keep on living.